A Shot in the Dark by Silverpup. Chapter 43. The days went by quickly. Bilbo found himself surprised by how fast time seemed to pass. Before he knew it, 3 days had gone by in the blink of an eye. In that time, he found his mind growing clearer and his memories returning. He even found his headaches beginning to decrease as his strength grew. Even his appetite was returning, and he no longer needed assistance in walking. In that time, he also realized that quite a few of his friends were avoiding him. Bofer, Gloin, and Biffer seemed to be perfectly content to pretend that he didn't exist. Occasionally, he noticed them watching him, but they never approached him. It didn't take a lot to realize that they were still angry and hurt with his actions. "I'm not sure how to approach them. Every time I try, they walk away," he complained to Balin on the fourth day as they stopped for a break. "How am I supposed to apologize if they won't even listen to me?" "Give them time. Your littles and departure threw us all off," the dwarf consoled as he massaged his wrists. "Then when we realized where you had gone, we faced the possibility of your death. It's only natural that we would be angry and upset with you." "But you're taking this all awfully well," he accused with a pout. Balin laughed. "Bilbo, for the past 3 moons, I didn't know if you were dead or alive. Finding you now, ill and forgetful and weak, is enough for me to let go whatever anger I held." "I wish the others would do the same," he muttered, pulling his borrowed coat from a certain king tighter around him. "Thorin isn't speaking to me either. Why do you think that is?" "Because it's Thorin," answered the dwarf, rolling his eyes. "He's no good with expressing his feelings in words, remember?" He couldn't deny it. "It's still strange, though." "What is?" "That no one has asked me about their futures. I thought you would all be curious." Balin looked up at him from under his snowy brows. "What is there left to say? You told us of our glories and failures. You wrote of our lives and even told some of us of our deaths. What more can you tell us?" "I suppose there isn't much left to say," he acknowledged. I don't know. I guess I built it up in my head for so long that I expected a bigger reaction from everyone." "Oh, there was a big reaction," reassured Balin, winking. "You just missed it." Bilbo bit his lower lip and thought. "So did my letter scare you? When it mentioned your death, I mean." Balin scoffed and shook his head. "Hardly. Walden took the news harder than I did." "Of course he did. You're his only brother," he reminded the dwarf, rolling his eyes. "Gloin was shaken too by Gloin's letter," his friend added, stroking his beard. "Dori too, of course, when he read Ori's letter. Even Ori was upset, followed Ori ran like a shadow until the lad finally snapped and threw his book at him." "Ori can be scary when he loses his temper," he agreed, recalling the punch the young dwarf had given him after the battle. Balin nodded. He gets him from his mother. His father apparently wasn't very temperamental." "You knew Ori's parents?" Bilbo asked in surprise. "No, I only met his father once, and everything about his father I learned from Dori," the dwarf explained, shaking his head. "His mother, Rika, was a lovely dwarf maiden. Dori looks the most like her, I believe, but Dori has her fierce spirit. Ori looks like he has it too." "What about your mother? What was she like?" "Mine," Balin said, pointing to his chest with wide eyes. He had clearly not expected the question. "She was quiet, I suppose is the word for it. She preferred to listen than to speak. She was a scholar, but she gave that up when she married my father. She and the princess consort were good friends." "I don't think I've ever heard you speak of her," he commented delicately. He didn't want to upset his friend. He understood that sometimes it was too hard to talk about your deceased parents, no matter how old you were. "No, I suppose I haven't," the dwarf acknowledged, nodding slowly. "She died in Erebor with most of my family. I was rather close to my mother. Much closer than I was to my father. It was hard losing her." "I understand. I was close to my mother, too," he said, reaching over to pat his friend on the arm in sympathy. Balin smiled. "Thank you. It was hard at first, but I've come to terms with her passing. I have many good memories of her, and it helps with the pain of losing her." "What was her name?" he asked. "Runa, daughter of Dargrin," Balin recited with deep affection as his dark eyes brightened. "I remember that she had the loveliest beard of all the ladies in the court. Her hair was a light brown colour, and she liked to braid tiny bits of pink and lavender jadeite into it. On special occasions, she used the pearls that my father gave her as a courting gift." "She sounds lovely," he said honestly as he tried to envision the woman in his mind. "She was. Balin takes after her a great deal." "Truly?" he said in surprise. He looks like our father the most, but his personality is all her, except for his temper. That he goes for my grandfather. Who do you take after then? Me? I suppose I'm a bit of both. I enjoy books and my solitude, like my mother, but I have my father's ambitious drive to be more than I am, the dwarf confessed with a laugh. Balin is happy enough being a warrior serving his king, but I would like to accomplish more in my life. Bilbo blinked and leaned back to rest his weight on his hands. You don't like being an advisor to Thorin? It is not the job I would have chosen for myself, Balin explained carefully, furrowing his brows in obvious thought. I serve as Thorin's advisor and minister, more out of loyalty than choice. He is both my king and kin, you see, and he needs my help in rebuilding Erebor. If things had been different and Smaug had not attacked, I would have probably followed in my father's footsteps. What did he do? My father was the war general of Erebor, the dwarf announced, puffing his chest out slightly and sitting up taller. He was in charge of all of the soldiers in the mountain, from the average city guards to the royal bodyguards. He was the one the king turned to if he wanted to go to war, and he was the one who led the armies into battle. It was a position he worked his whole life to gain. Bilbo nodded as he absorbed this new bit of knowledge. He never knew that Balin had such desires, but in hindsight, it should have been obvious. He had tried to reclaim Moria, after all, with only a small army at his disposal. At the time, he had chalked it up to Balin desiring an escape from Erebor, and the guilt he carried for having failed Thorin and the boys. It never crossed his mind that there had been more to it. In my last life, you came to me before you left to try and reclaim Moria, he admitted, pulling one leg up to his chest to rest his chin on. I never thought much of it at the time. I thought you just wanted to get out of Erebor and away from Dane. You two often clashed in opinions. Balin laughed without a hint of guilt or shame. We still do. I love my cousin dearly, I truly do. And I'm very proud of how he's grown into a proper dwarven lord, even with the odds against him. But every time I look at him, I still see the snot-nosed brat who used to follow Frederick around, and that makes it hard to take him seriously. He snorted as an image of a small and hairless Dane flashed through his mind. I wouldn't be able to take him seriously either. I'm amazed you could take Thorin seriously. I don't, the dwarf admitted, smirking. He is my elder and my king, but I was there when his voice kept breaking, and the time Frederick talked him into wearing a dress. Bilbo choked back his laughter at that mental image. What? What was he doing in a dress? Oh, it was some sort of prank that Frederick had concocted, Balin explained, waving a dismissive hand. That lad was ridiculously good at pranks. He and Thorin would have given feeling and killing a run for their money. No one ever speaks of Thorin, he mused, playing with one of his now neat and orderly braids. I've only heard Thorin speak of him once. Balin shrugged. Most have forgotten him or never knew him. The ones who did still find it too hard to think of him. Are you one of them? No, I've come to terms with Fredin's death. It was a sad and unfair one, but so were many others, Balin said as his eyes darkened in memory. I know that Thorin is still mourn for him, which is natural. He was their brother after all. Then, I don't know what he thinks. I'm sure he still misses him, but he has never been one to speak of his feelings. Was Dane close to Thorin? He wondered. The dwarf nodded with a sad smile. Oh yes, they were best friends. Dane practically idolized Thorin. Bilbo winced. He had never given much thought to Dane or his life and trials. In his first life, it was because of spite, and his second was due to more pressing issues. But now, he realized that Dane, like Thorin and Bover and the rest of his dwarves, had lost just as much as anyone else. Finally understanding that made his chest twist up in guilt for being so unfairly harsh on the dwarf for so many years. You've all lost so much, he said softly. I don't think I ever realized how much until now. We have. That's why we are so protective of what we still have left. Balin agreed easily, because people like him knew how to turn their pain into strength. Bilbo had always hated and admired that most about his friend. It was certainly not a skill he had conquered yet. Balin? I'm going to do my best to stay alive. I don't want you and the others to lose anyone else you love, he promised quietly, meeting his friend's gaze. I'm holding you to that, Balin returned, smiling with both his mouth and his dark eyes. Bilbo had learned long ago to tell which one was meant for him. By the next day, Bilbo had had enough of being ignored. Why are you avoiding me? He demanded from Thorin, cornering him when he was alone and far enough away from the others. Thorin slowly raised his brows as he looked down on him.
I have not been avoiding you. I've been giving you space. You're recovering from a brutal captivity and an unknown illness. I didn't want to overwhelm you with my concern, as you already have to deal with the others.
Well, I'm better now, so you can stop stalking me, he replied, tossing his braids out of his face. It actually stresses me more when you ignore me.
Oh.
Thorin raised his brows higher as a smirk curled at his lips.
And why is that?
Because it means you're brooding about something dumb and irrelevant, he replied, returning the smirk with one of his own. The king rolled his eyes.
You know, despite what my nephews say, I actually do more than brood about my past.
True. You need to also brood about your future, he agreed, nodding. The dwarf flicked him in the forehead. I'm glad you're not angry with me, he admitted, swatting the king's hand away half-heartedly. Not like the others.
Ah, finally picked up on that, did you?
The dwarf commented, crossing his arms over his chest. Bilbo nodded gloomily. Yes, I keep trying to apologize to them, but they just ignore me.
Would you like me to order them to listen to you?
Asked Thorin, frowning. Bilbo took a moment to seriously consider the offer before reluctantly shaking his head. No, this is my mess, and I need to be the one to fix it. Thank you for the offer, though. The king shrugged lazily.
Your problems are my problems.
The hobbit felt his face heat up. Thorin's words were hardly worth getting embarrassed over, but something about them still made him feel horribly awkward. In an attempt to ignore his fluster, he decided to change the topic to another matter that had been pressing on his conscience. You know, I never did apologize for stealing the Arkenstone from you, he said quietly, looking away from the king and to the dwarves standing off from them. He spotted Ori and Balin among the crowd, but no one else who looked familiar.
Thorin snorted. Well, I never apologized for hurting you and banishing you from Erebor either, so I'd say we're about even.
You did it on your deathbed in my first life, said Bilbo, ignoring the way the king in front of him suddenly stood up straighter. You held my hand and begged for my forgiveness. I gave it and then watched you die before me. I don't remember a lot of things even before I got sick, but I will always remember watching you die.
Bilbo,
in my first life, when I first took the Arkenstone, you hung me over the wall and threatened to drop me to my death. He continued cruelly, ignoring the way Thorin went unnaturally still. You didn't, obviously, but you wanted to. I could see it in your eyes. You were so obsessed with the Arkenstone that you didn't care who you had to kill to get it back. Bilbo finally looked back to the king and met his horrified gaze evenly. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty or remorseful. I'm telling you this as a warning not to fall into madness over that stone again. Twice now I have watched you lose yourself to this obsession. I will not tolerate a third time.
Why did you ever fall for me when I've been so horrible to you?
Thorin rasped, his horrified look shifting into one of guilt and bewilderment.
I nearly killed you. I branded you a traitor twice for trying to save me. How could you better help me, let alone love me?
Because you are more than your mistakes, the hobbit rebuked, sharply rolling his eyes. You hurt me, yes, but you also broke free from your madness and realized your mistakes. You even acknowledged the wrong you had done and tried to make amends. And yes, it was on your deathbed, but that doesn't make it any less sincere. For all your flaws and mistakes, you are a good dwarf, Thorin Oakenshield. You have always tried to do what is right for your people and family, and that is why I fell in love with you. The Dwarven King did not look at all reassured. His eyes were still wide, and his face nearly corpse white.
I can't believe all this time I've cursed and hated this unknown fool that you mourned for. When I found out it was me, I was happy because I assumed I must have treated you fairly. But now I know I was just as foolish and horrible as I first assumed.
Bilbo scowled and smacked the king's shoulder. You were nothing of the sort. Do you think I would have fallen for you and done all of this for some brute? Give me a little credit here. You were only cruel at the end because you had lost your mind. Thorin's frown never wavered, but he relaxed slightly. He had no idea if the king believed him or not, but he sincerely hoped that he did. The dwarf really didn't need another failure to brood over. I spent a lifetime missing you, he continued, deciding that if he was going to share it, then he might as well share everything. a single lifetime mourning and wishing that you had not died in that stupid battle. That is the type of love you ignited within me. Does that sound like something a horrible and foolish dwarf could do?
No.
The king admitted, his wide shoulders relaxing as his arms fell to his side.
You're right. There must have been some good in the other me for you to love. Just as I know that this other version must have cared for you too.
Bilbo shrugged. I'm sure he valued me as a dear friend. Beyond that, I really never did learn what he thought of me.
I can't say for sure either,
Thorin admitted with a small scowl.
but I do know that it would have been impossible for him to not care about you in some way.
He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at the dwarf's confident tone. Oh? And why is that? Thorin simply shrugged.
Because you are very easy to love, Bilbo Baggins.